Hello, YouTube. YouTube is very unforgiving with my little zitty poo that I have right here. Also, I need to get a ring light. I just do my makeup before I get on. I need to have a ring light. But look, I'm wearing my Dolly Parton shirt. And Dolly is just fabulous enough for the both of us. So just imagine that my hair, I teased it to Jesus and I sprayed it like hell and I put something over my zip. But I didn't. So hi, welcome. I'm going to be going live on Podbean here in a little bit. So we're just kind of having a little time. So on Facebook and on YouTube and on Podbean. So I'm going to simultaneously live stream the podcast here in just a few minutes. So we have not officially started. Like the actual episode has not yet begun. So I'm giving people a little bit of time to hop in, and then I'm going to push go on Podbean. And once we're pushing go on Podbean, I am going to rip the file from there. Rip. Like it's 2002 and I'm making a mixed tape on a CD. So I will be doing that here shortly. So just taking a little bit of time. So I'll just kind of chit chat for a little bit while I'm gathering people in. So I am doing my Gemini season. We have one Gemini podcast that is done already. That one is Are You a Good Witch or a Bad Witch? And then I'm doing another podcast. Today's is on the question, Are you Wiccan? Wiccan. Are you Wiccan? That's a question that I get asked on occasion. And it came up in my conversation with Cara of Cara Mia. I don't know why I did the hand. Cara Mia of Estes Cute Witch 772. So we talked about it briefly. And so I thought I'd expand on my thoughts about Am I Wiccan, since that is a common question that I get from people. Spoiler alert before we start the episode, the answer is sort of. The answer is sort of. My God. Kind of. But I'll talk about it a little bit more eloquently. How much more eloquently? TBD, baby, to be determined. So basically, I'm just going live because I want to give people the opportunity to ask questions live. I didn't schedule this or tell people ahead of time, so it'll probably just be randos on Podbean. There are always randos on Podbean and live streams, which I love. I don't always see randos in YouTube, and I rarely see randos in Facebook Live because I only project for my little protected group, my bitches, my star-spangled bitches. So those are people who are in my Patreon account, have access to the private Facebook, which is a little bit quiet lately, but I'm intending to do a little bit more. How do I do that? Hold on. Facebook says that I'm doing a bad job. And my FPS is too low. So that's something per second, like frames per second. Well, what do I do about it? Facebook? Oh, geez. Well, it's a long ass article, so I'm just not going to worry about it. And we're just going to hope for the best. Hope for the best. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. And once I push go on Podbean, it is for realsies. And we are talking. Let me pull up my notes. I have a script, but I'm going to extemp it, of course, because we all know I cannot just do a recipe from a cookbook. I have to improvise and make it my own. All right, here we go. You're listening to Stella Speaks, a podcast about b-tchcraft. In this podcast, we take feminism and witchcraft, social justice and self-care, throw those in the cauldron and see what bubbles up. I hope you stay for a spell. Today's episode is one in our question and answer series. So the format is there's a question at the beginning that I'll discuss in some length. Today's topic is, are you Wiccan? And then at the end, there's an opportunity for more Q&A because I am recording these live. Just a brief note about indigeneity, indigenous land, and acknowledging that. This podcast is recorded on the illegally occupied ancestral land of the Erie, Kaskaskia, and Mississauga, here specifically up in Northeast Ohio near the lake. If you want to learn more about the Indigenous history of Northeast Ohio, I have a little bit of information if you go to the podcast on Stella Speaks that I posted April 20th of 2023. It's called Listen First, Declutter Your Witchcraft Introduction. About 5 minutes in, I talk in some length about the Indigenous history of the area. If you're interested in the Indigenous history of your area, check out the show description on Apple Podcasts and Podbean, etc. I will have a link that you can click, which will show you some of the Indigenous history in your area very briefly, and then you can kind of dig in and learn a little bit more. So this question comes up, are you Wiccan? Occasionally. So we're going to define Wicca first, its historical evolution, and kind of dive into my personal experiences and the ways in which Wicca has influenced my witchcraft and modern witchcraft. Grab your broomsticks and let's fly into this discussion. So first of all, if someone's going to ask me, am I Wiccan? Well, let's talk about what Wicca is. So Wicca is a modern pagan religious movement that draws inspiration from various ancient traditions and practices. Now, some people claim its origins trace back to ancient times and in this unbroken lineage of witch cults, which a lot of that anthropology has been debunked, and we kind of realize it's a little bit of myth building. So Wicca as we know it today, although it is inspired by older traditions, Wicca as we know it today emerged in the 20th century. So key figures would be Gerald Gardner, Doreen Valiente, Alex Sanders. They played pivotal roles in shaping Wicca into a recognized and organized belief system. And then additionally, a little bit later, the rise of eclectic, what I would call neo-Wicca, but essentially like Wicca for all, expanded the boundaries of that tradition, embracing more diverse practices, incorporating elements from different paths, and also not requiring initiation in the same way that a traditional Wicca coven does. So we'll start on my personal journey. So I started out in witchcraft in the 90s, just reading whatever eclectic, witchy, pagan book I could get my hands on, doing spells with friends at sleepovers, things like that. I then joined the Unitarian Church in my mid to late 20s, and I acquired a more, instead of just like my little friends that like to do witchy stuff, I acquired a more, I don't want to say public. Yes, public. I guess a bit more organized, more structured practice, slightly structured in that I would attend about once a month. There was a witchcraft / paganism / earth-based tradition, kind of loosey-goosey Unitarian business group that would meet once a month. And so I would gather with those witches. We built some community there. We had a little eclectic coven that formed. And then in the 2010s, I initiated into a Gardnerian coven. So it was a profound experience. And then I studied in that coven for a couple of years. I attained my second degree elevation. So I did step away. I left Gardnerian practice to explore other paths and to get away from essentially hierarchy, gender essentialism, things that I saw in the community that I didn't love. And I've explored other paths, despite my experience maybe not being the best. And I'm writing a whole memoir about it. So it's a whole thing. You can, side note, if you go to my Patreon page, I have a few, I think about three posts from the draft of my memoir that I'm working on. It's called, the working title anyway, is Naked, Drunk, and Full of Brie, the almost true memoir of how a good little feminist witch like me ended up in a sex and death cult. It's long, so I'm gonna have to trim it down, but that's kind of the working title. Despite the whole naked, drunk, and full of brie-ness of my experience in that coven, I learned a lot, and it influenced and shaped, I think, my current understanding of witchcraft and my current ritual mechanics. But that's not everybody's experience. Traditional Gardnerian, Alexandrian, and other British traditional witchcraft, these groups are just falling by the wayside. It was already a small tradition. People don't need the traditions anymore. There's infighting and transphobic nonsense sometimes. So like a lot of these groups are falling apart, and other things are being built in their place. So I think the way of the future is Neo Wicca anyway. And it has been almost, I mean, since the 70s and 80s, when people started publishing books that showed you how to do it yourself and said you didn't have to have a coven to do it for you or with you. So in that sense, so that's my experience with Wicca. Right now, a big aspect of my current practice is in the reclaiming tradition. So the reclaiming tradition was spearheaded, kind of founded in a way by influential figures like Starhawk, who wrote the Spiral Dance. But now I think she steps back a lot. I don't see her really as part of reclaiming. She's doing other stuff, but the tradition remains, and it combines feminist witchcraft with activism, social justice, personal empowerment. It's a goddess tradition, but in a very gender expansive and inclusive, trans positive, egalitarian, anarchic kind of a way. And so the tradition emphasizes the power of ritual and magic in healing and in activism for personal and collective transformation. So through our rituals and practices, we as reclaiming witches connect with the earth, challenge oppressive systems, work towards a more just and compassionate world, essentially. In addition to that group, I'm still a part of that eclectic coven from back home. I'm a long distance member, so we all are a little different. We have a Christian witch in there. We have like a whole variety of practices. I am a druid, and one of the other members is a druid. That's sort of separate from my witchcraft, but we just work together. We're adaptable, collaborative, and we just come together to explore our paths while sharing rituals and connections without any sort of curriculum or classes, hierarchy, degrees. Like, we don't have any of those things. So my personal practice retains some of the elements of the ritual mechanics that I learned in the Wiccan Coven. There's certain ways of calling the circle and cleansing and things like that. Some of those tools I have retained and use. I don't use those practices in an obvious way with people who aren't initiated, because I still honor the oath that I took. So when you take an initiation into a coven like that, Gardnerian ones for sure, I assume other covens too. I haven't seen their books of shadows, but I imagine Alexandrians are similar. You promise to keep certain things hush hush, right? So there's certain secrets that you keep, and essentially the secrets are just the information that's in the Book of Shadows, which is like a book, a grimoire, a collection of rituals, poems, instructions, meditations. It's kind of almost like a scrapbook over the years that gets passed down. I don't know if scrapbook's the right word, because there aren't little bits of things, but it's like a cookbook, like an heirloom cookbook that gets passed down and gets added to. So you don't reveal what's in there with too much specificity. And then you don't say exactly like the names of the gods or how things work in the ritual circle. Like that's supposed to be secret. And I promise to keep that secret, so I do. I talk about my coven and my time in the coven, and I'm writing a memoir, but never about anything that happened in circle that's protected by those oaths. Now, sometimes I feel silly about being so dedicated to honoring these oaths within the sacred circle because a lot of that stuff is publicly accessible if you know where to look. But those hold deep meaning to me. So I took one in my first and I took a serious one in my second degree. And so I just do not divulge that information. So as we think about what it means, right, to be Wiccan, right? When someone asks, "Are you Wiccan?" What are they asking, really? Like, are they asking, "Are you initiated into a coven? Are you Gardnerian or Alexandrian?" Which are the two main flavors of traditional initiatory Wicca. Or do they just mean like, are you nice? Because I think Wicca has been that face of witchcraft. Like, we don't hex. We're always nice. We're the good ones. We're the good witches. So I think sometimes people are essentially asking me the question that I talked about in the first episode of the season, which is, are you a good witch or a bad witch? I think sometimes when people are asking the question, are you Wiccan? That's like the true underlying question. The underlying question is, are you a good witch? Are you a good witch? Are you one of the good Wiccans? Or are you a naughty, naughty Satanist or something like that? So there's that. That's part of what I think it is. And then I think also sometimes people that only experience they've ever had with a witch is a Wiccan. And so they're just trying to see, are you like this person? And that I talked about that in my conversation with Kara. I will link that episode in the show description. I'll link to Kara's YouTube, and you see how we talked about how Wiccan or not we are. And that concludes the prepared portion of this. Just looking and checking to see if anyone happened to jump on, because I did not tell anybody I was going live. I just pushed live and hoped for the best. A question. So it was a callery question. Somebody asked me, do I do spells? And the short answer is yes, but the long answer is I will be talking about that in an upcoming episode in the Gemini season. So we'll just table that question for now. Otherwise, I don't see any questions, just comments. So thank you so much for watching or listening, or however you were being here with me. I imagine you're listening right now. You're listening to it on the podcast when it was published. So thanks for being around. Just as a heads up, the Patreon is open for new patrons. So if you go to patreon.com/Stella Speaks Up, I'm doing a $1 special right now. So I don't usually have a $1 level. Patreon's lowest level you can set for your work is $1 a month. And I never had $1 one. I've always had higher amounts, but I am running a special during the summer season. So while I'm working through the Charm School curriculum with Kara, you can join along or just see what's up, read bits of my memoir, check out, I do tarot scopes sometimes. I'll just write things that are essentially blog entries, but they're only available for Patreon guests. And then you get early access. So I always publish my podcasts on Patreon first. I shouldn't say always, because there was one time Kara's came in real quick, but essentially I post the podcasts there early so people have a chance to listen before the general public. And then I also do live calls on the new moon. All kinds of different goodies are available. And for now, they're available for $1 a month. So if you sign up before Labor Day weekend, it'll be $1 a month only, and you'll get access to like my second tier. I have a 3-tier system, and you'll get access to everything in the first and second tiers for only $1 a month, which the second tier is worth like $20 a month. So you're getting a steal, and I'm going to keep that price for you for at least 1 year. and we'll kind of discuss what we're thinking next year. So thanks for thinking about doing that with me, and have a wonderful day. Blessed be, bitches. All right, that was a short one. So I ended that episode, and then I'm going to go ahead and roll into recording the next one. I'm just going to keep this going live. So if anyone wants to hop in and ask any questions, they can. It's really interesting to see how I just do nonsense when I'm live, huh? Okay. So next up, we have, what was the next question I was going to talk about? I did. Are you good or bad witch? Are you Wiccan? What's the other one I wanted to talk about? Let me go through my notes. Give me a second. I'm so sorry. Oh, can you do spells? Yes, that was the one. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to go ahead and just launch right into that one. If you have any questions, feel free to ask your questions at the end of the live show. So let's go ahead and let me set up a new live show. Question is, do you actually do spells? Answer the main question. Take Q&A at the end. Okay. I'm almost there, folks. I'm almost there. Thank you for listening to Stella Speaks, a podcast about b-tchcraft. We take feminism and witchcraft, i.e. b-tchcraft, and then we take social justice and self-care, i.e. self-social care, I don't know, throw those things into the cauldron and see what bubbles up. I hope you stay for a spell. Today's podcast is about the question, do you actually do spells? So I'm going to answer that question, and I'll take Q&A at the end. Before we proceed, it's important for me to take just a moment to acknowledge I currently live on ancestral land that is illegally occupied by me, by many others. We are on the land of the Erie, the Kaskaskia, and the Mississauga people here in Northeast Ohio near the lake. I went into a little bit about the indigenous history of the area in a previous podcast. If you want more information, like a full land acknowledgement, listen to the April 20th episode. It's titled Listen First, Declutter Your Witchcraft Introduction. About 5 minutes into that episode, I talk in some depth about those groups of people and their history with this area. I'm also going to put in the show description a link for you where you can look into indigenous peoples of your land, where you live, where you occupy, and kind of see the indigenous history of that area. My hope always being that then you'll work in solidarity with those people for movements like land back and food sovereignty and tribal sovereignty that are really under attack right now in the Supreme Court, but in other ways as well. So the question, do you actually do spells? This one came up in a Podbean Live a while back, and I just have to give you the short answer, which is yes, I do spells. And I guess the episode could be empty and over right there, but there's a whole lot to talk about. So over the course of the podcast, we're going to demystify the practice of spell work, delve into some intricacies about it, gathering ingredients, casting circles, working with deities, and then we'll kind of bring it back to the themes of feminism and self-care. So let's grab your cauldron and let's go. So do you actually do spells? Yes, a resounding yes. Spell work is tangible, transformative practice. But let's clarify some misconceptions. So, spells are not. So when people ask, "Do you really do spells?" Sometimes I think they're asking, "Do you supernaturally move objects around the room with your mind? Do you utter a simple curse phrase that causes a harm and someone drops dead immediately?" Like, no. Real magic is far more nuanced than that and more beautiful than that, than what's portrayed in like movies or novels. As magical practitioners, we recognize that spell work isn't just about gaining control over others or causing harm. It's about harnessing energy, setting intentions, working with the natural forces of the universe to create change. Spells usually aren't quick fixes or shortcuts, but more like a tool for personal growth, healing, and manifestation. A way to open up the universe to work in your favor a little bit. We don't wield magic to kill with the flick of our wrists or something. Instead, most of us approach spell work with ethics, responsibility, and a commitment to not harm others unnecessarily. Not every witch will never do harm, right? We talked about this in the episode of Are You a Good Witch or a Bad Witch? We talked a little bit about malevolent magic. So if you're interested, go listen to that episode before you listen to this one. But most of the time, our intentions with witchcraft, at least in the groups that I've been a part of and the people that I've talked to, it's usually grounded in a desire for positive change. It's usually grounded in empathy, love, justice. Usually focus on things like healing, empowerment, protection, and even dismantling oppressive systems if you're in the right group. So, our spells can be a force for healing, transformation, and social change. So, as a feminist witch, you can view spell work as a tool for personal and collective transformation. It allows us to reclaim our agency, to be in like personally. Now, not all witchcraft is religious and not all witchcraft works with goddess energy and things like that, but a lot of it does, and mine does. And that has been very empowering for me, especially when I was young, to see myself as an active participant, right? I'm a priestess, I'm a witch, I'm a part of this. And to see my gender mirrored in the gender of the goddess or the deity that we're deifying. So that really helped me grow and survive in patriarchy, essentially. Magic can also be a form of self-care. It serves as a sacred sanctuary. It gives you space to reconnect with your inner self, to nourish your spirits, and it's like intentional self-care, right? We're taking time out of our day to connect with the universe and honor our needs, prioritize our well-being, set boundaries. And sometimes if you're doing this in a group, it's not just self-care, it's community care, which is incredibly important. If we're going to heal the collective, we should heal collectively. Also, it can be a force for positive change, not just in a feminist sense, not just in a self-care sense, but even broader into just social change. Not manipulating or controlling, but aligning ourselves with the natural rhythms of the universe and infusing our spells with that love, with that commitment to justice. We're working towards a more equitable and compassionate world. So, yes, I do spells, but no, I don't just, go cuppus liftus and then like a cup flies in the air. Like, no, I don't do that. And that doesn't actually work. But witchcraft is real. It is a spiritual practice. It is a personal discipline. It's a way of connecting with the universe and yourself and just really having a sacred experience on this beautiful planet, which we embody and we live on. So, one thing that I think is interesting to talk about that is like, okay, then what is a spell? So you're saying you do spells, but they're not like the ones in the movies. Then what are they like? Okay. So a spell, the easiest way to describe it, and this is kind of maybe a lazy way, but I would say that a spell, a quick and easy way to say it is a spell is prayer with props. Now, not all witches really pray. Like you can do a spell that doesn't involve any gods in it. But prayer, if we can expand our understanding of the word prayer beyond just talking to gods, right? Setting intentions, making a petition to universal energy, to your deeper self, or some other being or way of being, is that could be a prayer too. Can't that be a prayer? It doesn't have to be just talking to gods. So a prayer with props. Now that's kind of also a lie because you could do witchcraft without props, but a lot of times we do witchcraft with props. So that's one way that I would describe it, just very briefly, to somebody who is asking about witchcraft for the very first time. I would say it's prayer with props. It's prayer with props. You could also say that it is prayer with focused energy. So instead of just saying words to the divine, we direct our energy in and through the universe through various means. So, what would those means look like? They can look like a whole lot of things. I've got a whole shelf full of books with spells and rituals and instructions for how to write your own, and they're all a little bit different. But what it can look like, you decide that you have a need, right? You're like, oh my gosh, my cousin broke his ankle and I want to heal him. So you have that need. Then you can construct the spell around that need. That might include cleansing yourself, cleansing your cousin, cleansing the room you're going to do the work. It might include casting a circle, which is creating with your energy an energetic bubble around you to protect you and anybody else in there, and to contain all of the power that you're going to raise during the spell. Then it might include asking beings to join you. So you might call in the energy of the 4 directions that are associated with the 4 elements. So you might call in air at the east, fire at the south, water at the west, and earth at the north. You could do that. Then during the course of this ritual, you might invite ancestors or gods, goddesses, or other beings, energetic beings, archetypes, right? Like ideas of things. And you could invoke what's called invoke, which is just like call them in, right? You could ask them to show up. So you could say, hey, Mercury, can you come and hang out with us while we work to heal? Because you're like a god who does healing stuff, so come to the spell. We wouldn't say it like that, but that's essentially what you're doing. So all of that is optional but useful setup. The spell itself is some sort of action. So this is often done what's called sympathetic magic, or you could say maybe symbolic magic, where you do something to an object and that object represents the target of the spell. So you can make a little dolly that looks like your cousin, and then that dolly has a broken foot or ankle or whatever I said at the beginning of this example, and then in ritual you sew it up. Or you could light a candle, and that way you can say, as I light this candle, the flame ignites bursts of healing energy to my cousin so-and-so. You could do energy work like Reiki. I've never done Reiki in a Wiccan or witchcraft circle, but I think it's allowed. You could chant, you can sing, you can dance. Those are very common ways of raising energy. You think about that I don't know how much of a I was about to call it a stereotype, but of witches dancing around a fire. But I've done that many times, so I don't think that's stereotypical. But dancing is one way. Having sex is another way. There are lots of ways of raising power, and then you direct that power at your goal, and that's a spell. So recently, I've done spells where I use tarot cards, and the tarot cards represented me, my husband, and some things that we wanted in our lives. I used those cards as images of that spell, kind of like a vision board, really. We should do a vision board. I've done in spells. Oh gosh, what have I done? I've woven. I've woven friendship bracelets in a spell ritual. It was more a ritual than a spell, but lighted candles, symbolically cut like a ribbon. There's lots of different things that you can do as spell work. And then that action is the spell. Now, does the spell work immediately? Depends. I've had experiences where things have happened very quickly. I've also had experiences where things happen not in the way that we expected. So we asked for a certain thing and we received what we asked for, but not in the way that we expected. That happens sometimes. Sometimes it just doesn't work at all. That also happens. Or it happens really delayed. So that essentially is what it means to do a spell or cast a spell. So yes, spells are real. No, they are not like what you would see in a movie, but they're still really fabulous. I still really enjoy it. I love doing spells. There have been times in my life where I've gotten away from spell casting because there is a difference between a spell and a ritual. So the spell is that action that you're asking for something, right? You're asking the universe or a god or a saint or an angel or a grandma. You're asking, or just yourself, or you're using herbs and mixing the herbs together and hoping that those herbs put an energetic signal out into the universe that you want something. So that's a spell. But a ritual might not have a spell in it. It's very common for rituals to not have a spell in it, in my personal experience in the witchy world. So let's say a bunch of witches are getting together this weekend for the upcoming full moon. This is being recorded just before a full moon. It won't be published around then. So let's say there's a full moon coming up and the witches get together. Are they going to do a spell? Like if me and my witchy friends get together, are we going to do a spell? The answer is sometimes yes, sometimes no. If we can do a ritual without a spell. So we could get together and just celebrate the gods. We can get together and just like sing to the moon and tell her that she's really pretty and that we love the moon. We could do some sort of rite of passage. We could read a story from mythology. Like all of these things are rituals, but not necessarily spells. And then I've experienced rituals that are attempting some sort of inner transformation it's not quite a spell, but it's more transformative than a ritual in a practical sense. And so sometimes those dance on the edge of, is it a ritual or is it a spell? But yes, we do spells. No, I can't lift a car with my hand, with my brains wiggling my fingers and lift a car in the air. Not possible. But a lot of things are possible, and you'd be surprised how well witchcraft works because it works on you, even if you don't believe in any of this, right? If you don't think the gods are real or you think that it's silly to wave a wand around. Hey, I've had my moments of feeling silly in my craft history, for sure. There have been times where I'm like, what am I doing? What am I doing? But I've really grown from those experiences. I've grown from that humility. I've grown from showing up, and I've received a lot of the things that I've asked for, from my husband to my new business, like so many things started as a spell and it became something real in the real world. And maybe it's all a placebo effect, right? Any of my little doubting Thomas types, any of my skeptics who are listening, sure, maybe it was the placebo effect. But if it is the placebo effect, wow, my brain is very powerful. And that is the type of magic in itself. So I briefly looked through the tabs here, and I'm not seeing any specific questions that I'm not planning on addressing later. So I'm going to go ahead and end the episode. Thank you so much for listening to Stella Speaks. You can find me on patreon.com/Stella Speaks Up. I'm on Instagram as Stella Speaks Up, as well as Twitter, although I'm hardly ever on Twitter. I do post to the Facebook page. There's a Stella Speaks Up Facebook page. And if you happen to be on the live call right now, you get to see Wittershins, who is my sweet, stripy little witchy boy. So thanks again for listening. I'll see you. Remember, there's that $1 Patreon month deal going on all through summer. So go ahead and get yourself signed up for my Patreon so you have access to all the charm school stuff and all of the cool content that I'm making for y'all. Have a wonderful day. Blessed be, bitches. Okay, so that episode is done. So we did, are you a good witch or a bad witch? Wee, you're so handsome. Look how handsome he is. Just look how handsome he is. He looks angry, but he's purring. I promise he's nice. He's a nice boy. He just has resting bush face like mama. He's so cute. What a good boy. Are you going to jump up on the table now? All right, Bubs. What's the last episode that I wanted to record today? These were going so fast. I thought they'd be like half an hour long, but apparently not. Apparently not. So let me look at my notes. Oh my gosh. This is a good one, but this is going to be a long one. I need to find my notes. I Hi. Oh, I thought about names. I was going to do an episode on names. No, I have a really long one about feminism. And where is it? I don't know where I saved it. If you're joining me live, I'm doing Q&A episodes. So I'm batch recording right now. My whole Gemini season, just boom, 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 bada boom, bada bam, ba bam. And I have long ass, really good notes for my episode about feminism because I had a friend who asked me, how does your feminism relate to your witchcraft? And then someone else asked like a follow-up question about kind of cultural appropriation and stuff like that. And I can't find it anywhere. I know. I remember even copy and pasting it because I wanted my friend to see my notes. I was like, hey, I know you don't listen to my podcast, so let me grab these notes for you. I was looking for the notes. Very embarrassed. Even though nobody's listening. That's fine. Where's witch versus bad witch? Can you do spells? Where's this feminism one? Oh my gosh. I'm just gonna have to harvest it. So I'm gonna get off YouTube and Facebook here and find my shit. All right. Thank you for being with me. If you watch this, you're a real one for sure.